Oh, these are.
Yeah, sorry. Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming out tonight on this gorgeous day. Well, a little rainy, but it was beautiful earlier. My name is Belle and I'm on the events team here at Books and Magic. We are so excited to have Kellye, Garrett, and Alafair Burke here with us to celebrate Missing White Women. Before we get started, I want to point out some logistics for how tonight's event is going to go. If you need to use the restroom at any point, the door is located next to the moleskin spinner right there. And after the talk tonight, Kellye will be signing and personalizing Missing White Women at the table next to where you checked in. So we'll let you know where and when to line up for that. And then if you're joining us virtually on the YouTube live stream, we'd love to encourage you to buy a copy of the book online using the link in the live stream description. Okay. We'll also be doing a hand-raised Q&A at the end, so please think of your questions now, and we'll get to that later. So we're so excited to celebrate this incredible book. Here's a great quote by Mary Kubica, and if this doesn't make you want to buy a dozen copies, I don't know what will. Kellye Garrett wows with her latest, a propulsive murder mystery that explores the dangers of social media with relatable characters you can't help but empathize with and heart-stopping twists. Missing White Woman is a one-sitting read that should be on everyone's list. So that's amazing. Kellye Garrett is the author of Like a Sister, an Edgar nominee for Best Novel, Anthony Award winner for Best Hardcover Mystery, and Lefty Award winner for Best Mystery, as well as Hollywood Homicide, which won Agatha, Anthony, Lefty, and independent publisher IPPY awards for Best First Novel, and was named one of Time's 100 Best Mystery and Thriller books of all time, and BookBub's top 100 crime novels of all time, and Hollywood Ending, which was nominated for both Anthony and Lefty Awards. Wow, that's amazing. Prior to writing novels, Garrett spent 8 years working in Hollywood, including a stint writing for Cold Case. She's a New Jersey native, a co-founder of Crime Writers of Color, and a former board member of Sisters in Crime. We're so happy to have Alafair here with us. Alafair Burke is a New York Times bestseller. His most recent novels include Find Me, The Better Sister, The Wife, and The Ex, which was nominated for the Edgar Award for Best Novel. She also co-authors the best-selling Under Suspicion series with Mary Higgins Clark. A former prosecutor, she teaches criminal law and procedure at a law school in New York, where she lives with her husband and dogs. So without any further delay, please join me in welcoming Kellye and Alafair to discuss this incredible book.
Thank you, Books Are Magic, for having us.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you all for being here. And thank you, Kellye Garrett, for this wonderful book.
Thank you for doing this when I met you. Thank you.
It makes me sound like a horrible person. It's a very easy yes. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to congratulate you on a spectacular book. So
thank you.
Congratulations. Official launch day is tomorrow, right?
Yes.
So we're the lucky ones who get it one day early. You've already gotten some really, really excellent national reviews. It's a finalist, right, for CBS New York.
CBS Book Club. We find out tomorrow, so fingers crossed.
So fingers crossed for you down to the final three. So it's been exciting to watch all of this happen. Yeah. So I'm glad I get to talk to you about the book. Page 1. I was like, how am I talking about that? Okay. All right, so your books always have such infectious protagonists. I always kind of fall in love with them by page 10. So this protagonist is Brianna Wright, who goes by Bree. Tell us a little bit about Bree.
So Bree is from Baltimore, and so a lot of times I write Black women, and I write strong Black women. And I wanted to write someone that was a bit more vulnerable this time, and so she's not that stereotypical strong Black woman. Her backstory is about 10 years ago. She got stopped by the police and falsely arrested, and it's kind of put her life on pause. She lives in the same studio she lived in college. She has the same job. She doesn't go anywhere. She's afraid. And so that's where we meet her, and she's finally met this guy who is kind of like sweeping her off her feet. And it takes her what she thinks is a dream trip to New Jersey, of all places, for a romantic getaway. So that's when we meet her. That's where she is.
Ty. He's sweeping her off her feet and other things. But there are parts of it that read almost. Trust me, there's goriness and darkness and scary things that we will talk about, but we're going to ease into that. But some of my favorite parts, like at the beginning, right? They're kind of. She describes their relationship as we're on the let's go on a trip phase, not instant Graham official,
Yeah.
right? Is that what the kids call it? You know, like these kind of youthful ways of describing exactly where they are in the relationship. You know, with these kind of rom-com terms. But do you like rom-coms? Did you know? Like, did you I find it very hard in a few pages to make readers really feel invested in a couple, especially when it's a new couple, right? Like, why do you care about these people, and why do you believe they care about each other? And I felt like you did that so effectively. Without it feeling overly light, you know. So, do you watch rom-coms? Have you ever written one? Because it kind of, you integrated that feel pretty seamlessly.
I mean, I used to love them. Who doesn't love like rom-com movies, right? So I love that element of it, you know, like that meet cute and things like that. So I think that probably has affected it. You know, most of my books, this is the fourth. Usually the person's dead before the book starts. And this time on page 50,
Everybody's alive.
exactly on page 50, the person comes up dead. And so I wanted to kind of establish the relationship between Bree and Ty, because it's not a spoiler to say that Ty also disappears when she finds the woman in the foyer. And so I wanted people to be invested in what happened to him, just like Bree is, so they can understand why she's doing all of this stuff to figure out what happened to him.
Okay, so
Versus just walking away,
okay,
right?
so you kind of eased us into the concept, right? That this woman turns up in the perfect vacation rental.
Yeah.
So your book starts with this great quote from the wonderful Gwen Ifill. I call it the missing white woman search syndrome, right? And that becomes part of your title, right? For people who didn't know, the source of that is Gwen Ifill. But do you want to talk a little bit, were you consciously thinking about that being the hook when you went into it, or did the title and the quote come after?
No, I had the title from the beginning. I think we sold the book when we sold Like a Sister, so 4 years ago, right? And I had the title for Missing White Woman and I didn't think it was gonna last. I thought Helen was gonna say no, but they liked it until they kept it. And so the idea of Missing White Woman syndrome is that white women get more attention when they go missing than black and brown women. And so I wanted to kind of, also, the missing woman is such a trope in domestic suspense, right? And I wanted to kind of play with that trope, but in a way of how a black woman would handle it. So I thought it would be really interesting to have like this viral kind of like Gabby Petito situation where the whole internet's fascinated with this missing woman, and here's this poor black woman who's kind of caught up in it even though she does not want to be. And how do we treat black women and black people in the media versus how we treat these missing white women? So.
And she goes missing, her name, Janelle Beckett, right?
Beckett,
So
yeah.
the missing white woman. She goes missing not in Bree's own neighborhood, but in a neighborhood that's unknown to Bree.
Yeah.
Did you make that choice intentionally?
Yeah, so I got the idea at Laura's house, our friend Laura's house. I was at her house, and she has a 4-story row house in Baltimore, and I was at a writer's retreat, and I was by myself, and I have an overactive imagination, so I thought I could go downstairs tomorrow and find a dead body, and I have no clue how it got there, and her neighbors would be like, who the hell are you? Why did you kill somebody? And so that's the idea behind Missing a White Woman. And so the idea of her being in this strange neighborhood, because also that neighborhood is a trope of domestic suspense as well, but again, she's a stranger in this neighborhood, and how is she going to be treated? How are people going to view this stranger who again is caught up in this crazy circumstance? So.
And she and Ty are pretty much there's only one other person.
There's only
of
the black
color,
woman,
right?
yeah.
In
She wasn't. That wasn't even the first draft. That was the second draft edition.
Okay, but I mean, it's so effective that sometimes trope isn't meant to be a bad thing, right? You're kind of taking a tasty ingredient from the menu of devices that crime writers work with, and you're combining them, I think, in really interesting and creative ways.
Right.
So to have that feeling of Bree she's the only person of color in a neighborhood where she has no known resources or connections, and then to have kind of the worst kind of person disappear on her watch, right? And then to have Ty, can I say that? And then, of course, well, maybe I'll put it this way. You mentioned Bree has this issue from her background that's kind of derailed all of her big plans, and that involves police.
Yeah.
So all these, my dog ear galley here, a lot of times in domestic suspense and the trope, it's like the neighborhood, it's the comfortable place. Yeah. It's the safe place. You've taken her out of that. And usually the side of the police coming is like, oh, but here's the police.
Right.
Someone who will listen to me, someone I can cry to. And Bree's not that person.
No, she doesn't trust them, right, because of her background, and I'm not like my family. My aunt's right here, but our family. I come from a family of police officers, so I'm not like that person who doesn't trust police. But I think with anything, there's good police and there's bad police, right? And the problem is you don't know who you're going to encounter. So I think that's what I kind of wanted to play. I don't even think the police are bad in this book. They're really just investigating, but she just doesn't trust them. So.
Another thing I want to talk to you about was the role that social media is. I wanted to save that while we kind of cover the beginning landscape. At one point, Bree's lawyer, I don't think I'm going to give anything away, that eventually there's a lawyer on the page, so she does have somebody that she thinks she can turn to. And Bree's in a state where she's still, you said Ty's missing, so I could never, it's always very hard to talk about suspense films. So once the author mentions it, I can mention it. I'm not going to point it out first. So Ty's missing. And Bree's the one who's been questioned by the police. And even though she's the one who's been questioned by police and kind of finds herself alone, she's actually more worried about him than herself, right? And she's worried about the police finding him. And the lawyer says to her, I'm more worried about these social media people, right? The influencers, the TikTokers, the internet sleuths, you know, the people who go down the rabbit hole and start naming names, attaching names to photographs and, you know, blasting their theories out to millions of people, right? So let's talk, am I right that, I think you and I share that, though, aren't we? Followers of the people who go down, aren't we rabbit hole people?
I'm a rabbit hole. I love wasting time on TikTok, you know. And when I wrote this, Gabby Petito went missing, and it was literally all over the internet. And I was as obsessed as everybody else, and I found a TikTok woman who I think might have even been integral in bringing her being missing to the public. Because she had a large following and she brought it up. And she would share like multiple videos a day. And the thing was, it was great because it got her story out there. But on the flip side, like she wouldn't really put any thought if it was accurate or not, right? And like, I remember like someone thought they found the guy who killed her boyfriend, Brian, and they put a picture of him online and they put it all over and it was not him.
Well, I remember that because I was down the rabbit hole with you.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like things like that where there's good and bad about social media, where it gives people, especially who don't have a voice as we should have. But on the flip side, as long as you have a lot of followers, like anything you say could be seen as, you know, fact, when it could not be. And that could be very dangerous.
Yeah, it's weird. It's right. It's this. I guess everything in our culture, no matter how serious it is, now becomes a meme, right?
Yeah.
That this poor woman was missing and nobody at the time knew if she was dead or alive. And so that's the serious, dark part of it. There's video of her being pretty clearly abused by him and the police not helping her. And then, you know, a couple of weeks later, it becomes this meme where people who, I don't know if you remember this, but people who looked like, what was his name? No,
Brian.
Brian, yeah. The guy everybody was looking for. He's a pretty generic looking guy. It's like a whole lot of people look like that guy, unfortunately. And so all these poor guys who happen to look like that guy, like it became a meme of like them like putting fake beards on, like this is what I wear when I go to the store so people don't, you know, call me Brian. But so you're taking these things that kind of becomes true crime fanfic entertainment almost, that I think you and I indulge in, and it's actually pretty terrifying in your book, right? So talk a little bit about the main influencer that you kind of use as a representation of all the other ones that are out there.
Her name is Billy. I named her because my friend won an auction, actually, Lisa Reagan, to name her. And so her name is Billy Reagan, and she's a makeup influencer. And Janelle Beckett, who goes missing, is one of her followers. So she's the person who brings Janelle missing to light. And she becomes that expert who is the chief investigator online. But again, she doesn't really put a lot of thought into if it's accurate or not, you know. And the question that Bree has is she doing this because she truly cares about Janelle, or is it just for likes? Because of course, every time you see her, because it's like every 50 pages or so, you see a TikTok from, or you read a TikTok from Billy, and you see that her likes have jumped up a lot and her followers have jumped up a lot, you know, and so, and even there's a moment where there's like, it's kind of static because she doesn't think anything is happening and she's kind of struggling to still stay relevant. So I think that's the question, is what's Billy's motivation? So.
And how does Bree, you want to talk a little bit about Bree, kind of her point of view with respect to this kind of TikTok investigation that's going on and the influencer investigations go on? Because initially she's sort of titillated by it, right?
Yeah,
Before she
yeah.
realizes it might
Yeah,
literally land on her doorstep.
Yeah, because the news is out before, when the book starts, the news is out. I try to plan it, like her mom sends her a story about a missing woman in Jersey City, and she's on TikTok and she scrolls past a Billy video, so I do try to plant it, you know, and she, again, because she finds out Janelle has gone missing in the neighborhood she's at, now there's some closeness, so she is interested in her, what happened to Janelle, before it starts. But it's just, again, kind of like you're saying, that gawking down the rabbit hole that we all kind of feel, because we're not really, it's entertainment for us, right? And then of course, once she realizes that this woman who's been dead in her 4 years, Janelle, it obviously changes things a lot, and now it's scary versus entertainment. So
Yeah, there's that moment where it's just so cutting. Like the voices of your characters, like I said, they're so infectious. Like I'm like, I can just picture somebody I know, someone like you. She goes from when she realizes that this woman's, throwing out her boyfriend's name on TikTok.
Yeah.
She's a TikToker, right?
Yeah, TikTok. Yeah.
And she says, now his name was out there, all because some woman would rather put on makeup than get a job. I was like, she has really turned on that Billy Ray.
I didn't realize how mean she was.
No, she's not mean. That's why the line kind of jumps out. It's like, oh, Bree is mad because she's not normally mean like that. Yeah. So, you mentioned Bree's mother. Another thing I've noticed in your books, again, kind of turning tropes on their head. A lot of protagonists in crime fiction are. So that's, why are they all orphans, or they're estranged from their parents who were horribly abusive to them? Like, they tend not to roll with their families very well. Your characters, if I'm not mistaken, they have complicated relationships with their parents, but their parents loom large in their lives still, even though they're adult characters, obviously. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Is that because it's an unusual? I think it's an unusual approach in crime fiction to show people in relation to a tight-knit family. Yeah.
So I think
all ups and downs.
So Bree's dad has passed away, and she's with her mom's alive, and when the thing happened with Bree 10 years ago, her mother just did not believe her, you know. And so can you imagine, like, the most traumatic thing happens in your life, and the one person who's supposed to like care for you no matter what does not believe you, you know. So they have a really kind of complicated relationship where her mother's kind of, she cares for her, but in a, I'm not saying not caring way, but it's more like, I'm going to tell you versus talk to you. And so her mother kind of, is in the background, and she kind of doesn't even tell her mother what's going on when she finds Janelle and Ty's missing. Her mother doesn't know. Her mother's calling her, and she's just ignoring her for days. So yeah, it's complicated. I like to think there's a good resolution.
It's complicated, but it's still, but, I mean, she's clearly still connected to her mother.
Yeah.
Despite
Your mom's your mom, right?
Despite it. No, just kidding. To make people uncomfortable and okay, so you started out writing in television, Cold Case, right? How long did you do that?
1 year.
Okay.
That was a strike too, so that was the last one.
Okay. I remember that. So, did you, at the time, were you somebody who wanted to be a novelist, or did your writing in TV kind of lead to
Since I was 5, I wanted to write a book, and I was too scared. And so I did journalism, I did TV writing, I did everything, and I was too scared to do it. And finally, I was brave enough. I had a good idea too, and I was brave enough about, 13 years ago. I had the idea for what was my first book, but it still took 4 years to write it.
I'm glad that you're so honest about that.
I'm too honest. I'm too honest. I think people act like, like, oh, it was great and everything's wonderful and it's so easy to write.
There are people who are just like, I just came out of the womb with a pen. I was writing stories before I knew how to write.
It's hard. I hate it.
And but it's nice that you said it kind of took some bravery to start.
Yeah,
I always
of
kind of
course.
say it's like when you write your first book. I mean, it's an audacious thing to do.
Yeah.
It takes a long time.
Yeah.
You said it took you 4 years. I mean, even I think if you are extremely confident, I can't imagine anybody writing a first book in a matter of months. It's going to be several months or a year, and you're doing it all for yourself. Really, you have no guarantee it's going to get read by a single soul.
Yeah, it's different. It's different.
So
I don't know how you feel, but
what led to that? Was there an impetus of, like, after all those years? And you're like, I'm gonna do it?
no, I was at a low point in my life, and I was like, I might as well, I have nothing to lose right now. I might as well do it. Yeah.
I started my first book when I was at a very low point in my life. It was kind of like, if I'm going to do something for myself right now, this is what I'm going to do. Yeah.
Stop
So
being
it's like,
afraid.
yeah. If I'm going to be moping around the house sad, I may as well do it on the computer and write stuff. So it's interesting that came from the same place. And did you think that you would keep writing a book? When I first started, I was like, I'm going to write this one book that I have in my mind.
So my first book was a series, and I thought in my brain, I was naive in that I thought it came out in 2017, and I suck it back, but I felt like I'd be on like what, book 8? I don't do math that great,
right?
Right? But like whatever, like a book a year, right? So I thought I'd be on like book 5 or 6 of the series.
Yeah.
And then my publisher closed and all this fun stuff. And so I had a reset with my career where I was like, okay, I wrote these 2 books in a series. The third book was really hard to write. I was making the same jokes. I was trying to keep it fresh. It was not working. And I was like, what can I do now with my career? Because again, it's like this reset. And I had the idea for like a sister. I'm like, okay, I'll try standalones. And someone like you who's done, because Alafair has written both series and standalones, was inspiring to me.
Oh.
That I'm like, okay, well, they can do it, then I can make that transition as well. So yeah.
Yeah, good job. Do you worry now that you've got these 2 so far really successful standalones? Well, would you agree with me that they're harder to write than a series book?
They are harder to write because with the series you know the characters, and with the standalone you start fresh with characters every time. And so for me, I was so immersed in Dana, who's the first main character I had, that when I was writing like a sister, I would have to go, okay, no, that's not how Lena would handle it. Like, that's not how Lena would handle it. That's how Dana would handle the situation. And so then I became so immersed in Lena that now I have Bree, and I'm like, no, that's not how Bree would handle the situation. That's how Lena would handle that situation. So I'm sure with this new book, it's like I'm so immersed in Bree, I now have to shed all of Bree, because I write first person, and now create this new character. So that's
hard to do.
Yeah, it's
hard.
hard.
You finish your book and it's like you want to stay with these people.
Yeah.
I don't want to be the interlocutor starts talking about herself. just an aside, when I needed to regroup after 3 books in my first series, I wrote a standalone based on meeting my husband online, which was very novel and new at the time, which shows how long ago that was.
It wasn't a murder mystery, was it?
It was. Yes, our Sunday Styles wedding announcement suggested that I had based a serial killer book on my fiance. So, but it's not. It wasn't. It was a misunderstanding. But in any event, wasn't that romantic? But it was supposed to be a one-off, and it became a series and had 6 books in it. And then I wrote another standalone, and then the characters from the standalones keep turning up in other people's standalones.
Yeah, the whole Alafair book world.
But I get yelled at for it by
who?
the intellectual property lawyers, because then if somebody wants to buy one of said books and they get all the characters in it, it's like, well, no, they can't have that character because that character's not in the book. So don't do that.
No, still Kellye Garrett world.
That's my advice. Don't create a world that's tempting.
You know what's funny? I always tried it. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna put a little Easter egg for another book, and I always forget. I always forget. I'm like, oh wait, I can't forget.
That's very funny. Are you working on something yet? I know, that's the worst question.
The editor's like, are you?
No, I'm you're not ever supposed to ask a writer what they're working. You're working on this book tour.
Yes, I'm working
You
on
got
a book tour. I have a
lots,
short story
right?
coming out with Amazon in the
That's
fall.
right.
So yeah, but I am working on something. It's I write so slow. I write so slow, internet. I write so slow.
You realize that other people will be like, she's written 4 books in how many years? That's not slow, so.
Yeah, but some folks write like a book a year. Not me.
Yeah, there are people who write like 12 books a year, so
Yeah.
that I
Also,
really don't
make way
understand.
much more money than we do.
I always say, it's like, oh, you don't get paid by like the day, you get paid by the book, like go faster. Your tour, where are you going?
Oh, so this is the first one, and I was telling my coworkers that like this is my first time talking about this. I don't know how it's gonna go, but I think it's going
It's
okay.
going great.
And tomorrow I'm in Jersey City with Alyssa Cole, and then Alyssa and I go to Philadelphia on Wednesday, and DC on Thursday, and then May 9th I'm in Houston, and then I'm going to London I feel very fancy. I'm going to London end of the month, and then I'm going to Toronto in June. And then I'm tired.
I mean, not to be too inside baseball-y on the business side of things, but am I correct when, like a sister, your big kind of breakout standalone, when that came out, that was when things were still kind
It
of.
was big, like the pandemic
down,
was
right?
still happening, but it was very like slowly opening. So we did one event at the Strand, but we didn't really do anything.
Yeah,
I
so
went to Toronto.
Does this feel different?
I went to Tucson, I think too. It feels bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like a fancy author right now. I sit here in my cape.
Cape is fab. For those of you on the internet, she's got this amazing cape. Cape what? Cape?
What did you call it, Alyssa?
Capelet?
The cape.
Your books always use technology. We talked about specifically about social media, but technology evolves, right? And it
Oh
seems
my
like
God,
your
you
books
guys, the
are
TikTok
always at
drama
the
is
front.
freaking me out. So when I was writing the book, I went to Twitter, and literally all the freaking Twitter drama with the X and all that crap was happening, and I was copy editing, and I was like, I'm just gonna leave it as Twitter. And then now all this TikTok drama, I'm like, geez. So I
But
try
you
to
have
keep it.
TikTok in there.
I do. I have
Yeah.
TikTok, so I'm like, now they're trying to kill TikTok.
Oh, yours.
Yeah, I should make stuff up.
I'm trying to think if you have. I think as long as you have something in the book that kind of shows when it's set, right? Because then,
I don't think
I have books that call it Twitter, but in the summer that it's set, it was still Twitter.
use the year. I don't put the year.
No, but it kind of refers to like things that have been reopened for 3 years.
Oh,
like
I
so, you
should-
kind of sort
I
of
should
you
start
kind of
doing that.
vaguely know that it's not literally today, because I think that sometimes I find myself doing that. I'll be reading a book that because it's contemporary, you're picturing it as today, but then if it refers to something having happened in the world, then you realize like, oh, of course, like the writer was writing it in their current time, which was 2.5 years ago.
Yeah, because we write books years ago. Like I finished this book a year ago. You know, so it's kind of tricky because by the time I'm doing all this, I've moved on with my life. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's kind of hard because, and you can't like guess what. I would never have guessed that like Twitter would change its name, right?
Right, exactly.
Or that TikTok, like the government would try to kill TikTok. I would never guess that. So you try to guess things, but you're never gonna get it right.
Well, the saddest thing, the thing that makes me so sad, like the nostalgia I have in my books, I really, really like restaurants. I feel very deeply about them, and they basically become my second homes. And all these places are closed now. So like an old book will like be set at by the time the book comes out, I'm like, well, that place is gone.
I think that's the problem. 'Cause I try to do real places and real events, and it's tricky.
But given how much you use technology, I mean, I assume you do that intentionally, right? I mean, you know that, but you're very good at that because it can be that can actually be a problem for some writers. Like you kind of have to adjust to a modern world. You know, it used to be that your protagonist could get stuck and not be able to call anybody, and now, you know, spoiler alert: if someone loses their signal on their phone and their battery is suddenly dead, something's about to go down. you gotta write your way around the technology, and so that kind of stinks that you've got to like, oh, I've got to deal with the cell phone, but you actually turn it into an asset, like you use it in really savvy ways. So as the technology changes, like, do you think you'll try to stay, like if TikTok becomes some other new thing, will you try to always be at the forefront of that, or like will you age your characters up to where someday you'll have a protagonist who's like, I don't know how this TikTok thing works.
I mean, I think I probably will, just because it's like what I like to. I like to do it. I like to be on TikTok and stuff. So I'm sure whatever the next cool thing is, I will be right on.
Someday, 25 years from now, you'll realize that. You know what? It's completely realistic for a character even 10 years younger than me to have said, I did Facebook and then I did Instagram and I'm not going to learn TikTok. where I am. And it's like, my character could feel the same way. Crime Writers of Color.
Yes.
So I don't want to always, I know you always have to talk about that, but in the way it should be that you get to talk about it. So for those of you who don't know, in addition to being an incredibly talented and prolific author in her own right, I mean, Kellye has gotten a huge reputation for just being a champion for the genre itself and then individual writers within the genre, including being one of the co-founders of Crime Writers of Color, a group that was very sorely needed and that you kind of managed to make soar very quickly, S-O-A-R, soar very quickly. You got the Raven Award from the Mystery Writers of America for that last year. Can you talk a little bit about, talk about brave moves? That was a brave move.
So Crime Writers of Color is we started off with 30 people. I co-founded it with Walter Mosley and Gigi Pondian. And I was just really surprised there was not a group for people of color who write crime fiction. And I just so happened to do an event with Walter Mosley, and I had heard he wanted to start a group too. And I was like, well, if I meet Walter Mosley, the first thing I'm going to say to him is about this group. And I literally, that was the first thing I said to him. And then, to his credit, he called me the next day. We argued for an hour, which is our relationship about the group. But we started it, and he brought all his people he knew. I brought all my people I knew. Gigi brought all her people she knew. So it started off with 30 people. And now we have over 450 people in the group, and it's from people like a Walter Mosley and an Alafair. Burke.
You invited me.
Yes. To people who are just starting out and I just want to write a crime fiction novel, because publishing is so hard, and then you factor in dealing with racism that's gonna be there, and we needed a safe space to network with each other, to build each other up, to commiserate with each other, and it's been 4 or 5 years, and I'm just amazed at how active and supportive the group is. We have a good news thread where we cheer. Anyone can put news in there and we all cheer for them. And it's just truly amazing group. It's exceeded expectations.
Yeah, and then kind of to step out from not necessarily, I never want to ask a writer to talk about their own challenges, any pressures that anyone has put on you specifically, but I think since you're involved in that group, I think maybe you could talk about it at a more general level. There's all these discussions now about who's allowed to write what, right? Whose stories belong to whom, and I think we often hear that from the perspective of maybe a straight author who wants to write a gay story, and they're kind of told, do you really want to do that? Or a white man who wants to write a book about an African-American woman, they'd be like, do you really want to do that? But do you think writers of color, is there pressure on writers of color that you should be writing about race, or you should be are there certain stories you can't tell, or do you think that the publishing industry looks to writers of color only for specific stories?
I think the problem is that people want us to just write about trauma, right? And how hard racism is. And do I deal with racism on an everyday basis? Yes, but I'm not getting called the N-word, right? But it might be a microaggression, right? And so I don't think it's fair to expect people of color just to write about trauma, right? And to only be valued for that. I think if we want to write about that, then that's great. However, we should be able to, just like our white counterparts, we can write, books that have deep meaning. We can write fun beach reads. And I think that is my frustration, that right now, I think it's the best time to be a marginalized author, because publishing is, people read books about people of color? Yeah, duh, we do. But at the same time, I still feel like the media and a lot of publishing, they still put such a premium on books about trauma and how hard it is to be mistreated. And I wish that we were able, that's the next step for me, is now that we're hopefully not trendy anymore, that we are able to write about everything. You can be gay and be able to just write a book about, working at a job without it being Like, why didn't I learn anything from that? What, like, I've heard people say, what's the point of the character being gay if it's not about them being gay?
Yeah,
Like,
right.
gay people have jobs.
That's perfect. Well, as on behalf of somebody who I would go to conferences when I first started out, which was a while ago, it was like 22 years ago maybe when I went to my first VoucherCon. And I'm only half Asian and most people don't even know that. But even as just somebody who grew up and lived and worked in more diverse spaces, I was very struck by, oh wow, okay, this is what this looks like. And it looks very different now. And I think as somebody who never did speak up and like I would notice it but not do anything about it, I appreciate you very much for that. So I want you to read from your book, but if you don't want to, you don't have. Think of it as practice. But you don't have to.
No, I can't read from that. I'm too old to see the writing, so I have to get it from here.
Yeah, you hold your microphone. Everybody can look at your cake look. Nice.
I've only read this like once or
We're a
twice.
friendly crowd though. If you don't
Yeah,
want
be
to, but
nice.
you can say no too.
No, I'm gonna do it.
Okay.
My glasses out.
Can I hold anything else for you?
No, I think I'm okay. Okay, so I've never read from this before, so you guys be nice to me. So this is just the first chapter. I was going to jail. I knew it, she knew it too. I could tell by the way she looked over at me, or rather didn't. We were the only two people on this block of fancy smancy row houses. A thin sliver of grass and a fence at half-mast separating the two of us. When she came through the wrought iron front gate, I was already feeling as lost as Dorothy in Oz and ready to give up anything to snap my Asics together to go back to Maryland. I was excited when I first heard the gate slam the next house over. I'd even smiled initially when I looked back at her, convinced her sudden appearance was a good thing, that finally there was someone who could help me, my Glenda. I couldn't see much of her, not at first with the sun being long gone and the darkness turning her into just a skinny blob. She didn't take human form until she passed through the remnants of the floodlight from the house attached to the other side. And even then, I couldn't make out more than a square inch of her face. Blame a face mask as red and sparkly as a pair of ruby slippers. But I didn't need to make out a nose, a pair of eyes, perfectly contoured cheekbones, blonde hair to tell she was pretty. The accessories filled in the blanks. Black jumpsuit, rose gold hardback suitcase, stilettos. She even somehow managed to not look ridiculous wearing sunglasses at night. She looked like she belonged there. Like she was the one taking a long weekend jaunt with her new boyfriend to a city she'd never been, with keyless door locks, 4-story row houses, and unobstructed views of the Manhattan skyline. I, on the other hand, looked like someone standing in the dark outside a place I didn't belong, trying to get in without a key. It was exactly who I was and what I was doing. My outfit was wrong, Target. Suitcase was wrong, Amazon. Skin was wrong, brown. Hair, kinky and getting bigger by the second, was definitely wrong too. The most expensive things on me were my sneakers. She didn't look in my direction for more than a second, pulling her oversized purse closer to her, quickening her step up the stairs to her pitch black stoop, or whatever they called it in these fancy ass neighborhoods like this one. But a nanosecond was probably all she needed. Good thing I was already about to cry. Blame the damn door and my inability to get it open. I tried 3 times already. Put in the code Ty had given me, hit the key button, jiggled the knob like it was some complicated handshake. I did it a 4th time only to yield the same results. The only change, the new audience of one, looking like she wanted to boo me off the stage like this was the Apollo. I braved another glance over. I was quick, but she was quicker. Turning her head away so fast the crystals on her mask looked like sparklers as they caught the light. She'd been watching my latest attempt. Even from a distance, even in the dark, I could make out the pale white manicured hand gripping her cell phone like the weapon it could be in these situations, at least for people who looked like me. I pulled my own phone out, this one a lifeline. Ty picked up on the second ring. Be there in 15, he said. You're in the Uber? Not yet, but I will be. Packing up now. My phone said it was already 10:46. He'd sworn he'd pick me up from the train station, then swore he'd meet me at the house. He'd been wrong on both counts. Oh. It was just a syllable. When I didn't even say that loud, yet he still heard it. Everything okay, Bree? I glanced over. She was still there standing with the screen door open, pretending not to watch as she took her own time going inside. Yeah. I wiped my eye as I spoke. It wasn't the first time I'd lied to him. It's the code. It doesn't work. Really? It worked this morning when I checked in. 10:18. It's 10:19. That was the one in the text. The one I plugged in 4 times. I'm pretty sure it's 10:18, he said. Let me check. But I didn't wait for him to do it. Just tried the door again, but 10:18 this time. It buzzed practically before I hit the key button. The knob turned as he spoke again, realizing, I sent you the wrong code. It's fine. Another lie. I glanced over, hoping to catch her watching me again, nodding as she realized she was wrong. That I wasn't some thief in the night, that I did belong here, that my boyfriend had given me the wrong code. But of course she'd already disappeared inside.
So good. I know you all. I think you guys all have copies. People online, it gets better and better. Order your copies from Books Are Magic, and we have time. We'll have time for questions from you all. Yes.
So Kellye, I obviously love all of your books so much, and I love how you guys discussed how special each protagonist is in each of the stories. But what I really love is that each world of every book is so distinct and so different. And I wondered if you could speak a little bit about how you are able to do that, because it's really hard to do.
Okay, so for people online, the question was a nice observation that all of her books feel like the worlds are very distinctive and unique. And how do you make each place feel fresh and different?
So my first 2 books were intended to be like lightweight, almost comedies, kind of like a heightened sense of reality, like not meant to be realistic. And so I think that helped with it. They were meant to be funny and like not feel like it could really happen. And then with Like a Sister, it was meant to be like real world. Like this could truly happen to me. This is not meant to be a silly book. It still had humor in it, almost too much. Like when I was writing Like a Sister, I swore I was going to write the most serious book ever. And I had a friend, Lizzie Skardick, who I'll never forget. She texted me and she's like, "Oh, I'm laughing hysterically on the train." And I was like, "No, like you cannot laugh at my book. Like I'm writing serious literature, right?" And then I kind of like leaned into it where with Lena, her outlook is what's funny. It's not the situations, you know. And then I think even with Bree, Bree's not meant to be sarcastic, you know. But again, I think just it's better. I think all my characters, it's better to laugh than to cry, you know. So I think the 2, Like a Sister and Missing White Woman, are more similar than the other 2, which are definitely meant to be a lighter, funny, different type of world. So, thank you.
Great question. Other questions? Yes.
This is a beautiful book
Hi,
cover,
Kellye.
Kellye. Hi, Kellye. Can you tell us the process behind developing book cover designs with a graphic designer? And is there anything from this particular cover that you want us to know? Or is there like a hint to the story in this typography?
Okay, so the question is about the beautiful book jacket and the process of working with a designer on a book jacket, and if there was anything that you specifically wanted to point out about it.
I think we had a lot of discussions because it's called Missing White Woman, but it's about a black woman, right? And so the idea is, how do you convey that so people aren't like mad? What, you tricked me, you know? And so like my team, my Helen's over there. I just love that they kind of chose this main image of a black woman. I think it's great to have a black woman on the cover of a book, you know, which I think is more common now, but like when I started out, it was weird, like rare to have a black woman. They would just rather have like a picture of a building, right? So I think that's what we did. I know that her hair was a little different, and so I requested that her hair change a little bit more like mine in real life. But we did that, you know, and I think the typography is kind of a holdover from the first Like a Sister book. So I guess it's my brand.
You know you're there when you've got a book jacket brand. Yes, other questions?
My sister's like staring me down. Hi.
I'm a law professor by day. I can call on people and I can be really scary. According to Ray, my professors, I'm terrifying.
I'm trying to remember the answer. This is true. I feel like when you start writing a book, do you always know, without giving it away, what the ending is going to be? And you know what you're going toward, or do you find surprises along the way?
Do you? So the question is whether you know the ending before you start, or do you get surprised along the way?
I usually know the ending. I don't see how people can't know the ending. Like I have to plan and pay off stuff. Usually the journey changes. Helen's my editor, and so I wanted Bree to be meaner at the end, and Helen told me she was being too mean. I think a little nicer, but yeah, I should have like the Kellye version where she's Kellye version. The director's cut. It's like the writer's cut.
Any other questions? Yes.
Has your writing style or process changed at all between like a sister and Missing White Woman?
Yeah.
Has your writing process or style changed since you wrote your first book?
Yeah, so my first book, I was still afraid to write, like the blank page scares me. And so I would write like 30-page single-spaced outlines. And then I would always throw out the third act as I was writing. So with this one, I did what Allison Gillen calls the headlight method, where you just figure out up until like what you can see in the headlights. And so even though I knew the bigger parts of the book, I kind of still would break it down and outline it a bit at a time. So, and I had certain things, like I thought one character would be meaner, and she was nicer, and different things. And Billy kind of evolved, which is the TikTok person, a lot too in it. So it was interesting, but I think I always will have to know. I can't start a book without knowing who did it. So.
I think in the past you've compared it to screenwriting, that you use like what people call the save the cat method, where you kind of beat out the whole thing.
Yeah.
Do you still do that before you do the headlights, or have you kind of stopped trying to beat out the whole, all of the beats, or like the big turns? Like, do you...
it's comfort food for me to know the big beats and to know what I'm writing towards. Yeah. So I might throw it out, but at least I have to have some safety blanket.
Okay.
So yeah.
Great question. All right. Yes, one more.
We heard that you love TikTok, and I know that you're a creative and joyful person anyway. Are there other cultural wellsprings you go to like pick up the vibrant, playful language that you use, or the descriptors?
We just had a conversation at my job.
The question was about, sorry. There's like 8 billion people watching this. They need to know the question. So, you're a fan of TikTok, but the question is, you're such a vibrant and cheerful person, and are there other outlets that you go to kind of immerse yourself into that kind of a voice?
We were having this conversation at work about like what young people say. What is it, Olivia? I church?
I just burst out laughing.
How do you call it though?
Ishbol.
Ishbol?
Yeah, it's like IJBOL.
So guys, the young people now say Ishbol. Let's don't use that. But honestly, like I hate to say it, my niece and nephew are 9, and I like listen to what they say. Yeah. I'm like, oh, that's what the kids are saying, because they're all on TikTok too. They have like their phrases like bro and all this stuff. So
yeah, my nieces and nephews are now in their early 20s. I think all of them are in their early 20s now. And I went from like 10 years ago being the cool aunt who wrote books and would occasionally ask them questions. And now they're just like, Auntie, no. We don't say that anymore.
That's why I don't cringe, because my niece is like, you're cringe. I'm like,
you're 9.
Exactly, you're 9 years old.
Well, thank you all for being here. Ready to sign some books?
Yeah, we're ready.
Congratulations.
Very, very brief. Thank you all for being here. Thank you both. And we're going to be signing books in the copyright where my coworkers are pointing right now. And so we'll have you line up for that. And we have copies of Alafair's books as well up at the front.
They're so
please-
good, you guys.
Yes, so please come up and buy any extra copies. And that's it. Thank you for being here.
I'm gonna run.
Settle down.